Hey guys, Matt from Renclif Media here. Welcome to another tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you guys exactly how to create a short animated title for your YouTube videos. This is going to be done completely in Adobe Premiere Pro CC, and this is going to be the title we're creating. So I'm just going to show you guys right now. So it's going to be pretty short and sweet, but it just adds a nice touch to your video intros. And we're going to start from the very beginning. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new sequence. I'm going to go to File, New Sequence. And I'm just going to select a 4K preset from here. I'm going to use the Red R3D HD 4K. And I'm going to select 4K HD 16:9, 29.97 frames per second. Just going to hit OK. Now I'm going to drop in some footage so I've got a rough guide as to where I'm going to place my title. So I'm just going to select some footage that I have. Just going to drop it into my timeline. Just going to hit keep existing settings. This is 4K 60, but I'm just going to be using a 30 frames per second sequence. And that's just so I can slow it down to 50%. I'm just going to trim this clip. Firstly, I'm going to delete my audio because I don't really need this audio track. I'm just going to hold down Alt on PC or Option on a Mac and click on my audio track and hit delete. Now once I've got to the place where I'm roughly going to cut my footage, I'm just going to hit Q on my keyboard to trim the beginning of the clip to the left of the playhead. Now I'm just going to scrub through my footage and I'm going to trim the end of the clip by hitting W on my keyboard. So I've got a rough cut with my footage. Now what I want to do is, now that I have the guide to where I'm going to place my title, I want my title to start roughly when I'm panning up to the sky. So I want my title to appear roughly here. So firstly, I'm going to create the title. I'm going to go to File, New, Legacy Title. I'm just going to call this Intro. Hit OK. It's just going to take a little bit to load. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. So now I'm going to click on my title text tool right here. I'm just going to drag from this left guide here across to the right guide so that my text is centered. Now I'm just going to select this center alignment button and I'm going to type in the text that I want to put in. So in this case, I'm just going to call it a short film. I'm going to use all caps though. So a short film. Now I just want to change this font. So I'm going to select a font right here. I think I'm just going to go with this one right here. Now I want to make this a little bit bigger, so I'm going to make it, I think roughly 140. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Maybe a bit smaller, 135. Now I'm just going to make the A bit smaller to make it look a bit nicer. And make this 90. I'm just going to space it out a little bit more as well. So I'm going to go to my tracking. I'm going to make this 2, give it a bit more space. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to close this down. And now I've created my title, and my title is actually in this folder right here with the rest of my footage, but I don't want it to be there because I want to keep my project nice and tidy. So I'm just going to create a new bin by clicking in here, going new bin, and I'm going to call this intro text. Sorry, I'm in caps, intro text. Hit enter, and then I'm going to drag my intro text into the intro text folder. Just going to minimize these other folders. Now I'm just going to drag this onto my timeline above my sequence, above my video clip. Now what I want to do is adjust this text so it's in the center of the frame. So I want it to start roughly about there. So just going to double click on this text. And I'm just going to click on this arrow pointer here and I'm going to drag this down, this frame down. And I'm going to drag it down to the center roughly. So that's looking pretty good. Once I'm happy with it, I'm going to close this down. So we now have a rough guide of where our text is going to go, where it's going to appear. Now that we've created the first part of our title, we now need to create the line that appears before the title appears. And we need our title firstly because we need it as a guide so that we can draw the line underneath it and we can make it the right width. So now I'm just going to drag this to the layer above because I want to put my line on the first layer so everything's in order. And now I'm just going to I'm going to click off that clip. I'm going to go to File, New, Legacy Title, and create a new legacy title called Line. Just going to hit OK. It's going to take a bit to appear. Now I'm going to click on my line tool up the top left here. I'm just going to draw a line with a little bit of spacing beneath my text, and it's going to be a little bit longer than the text as well. So roughly like so. That looks pretty good. Now what I want to do is make sure this line is in the very center of my frame. And that's very important so that we can do all the animations and they work properly. So when you go to transform up here on the right, you'll see X and Y position. Now you want to make the X position at the dead center of the frame. In this case, the center of 4K is 1920. So that's in the dead center now. And now I'm just going to close this once I'm happy with it. So I now have my line. I'm just going to make sure that my line is in the same folder as my text. I'm going to drag it into this intro text folder just to keep everything tidy. And now I'm going to click on my line and drag it into my sequence onto the first layer. And that's the layer above the intro text. So now what we need to do is we need to make this line appear. So we don't want it to appear straight away. We want it to gradually appear. So firstly, I'm going to hold down Shift. And I'm going to lock my playhead to the beginning of this clip here. Now I'm going to go to my motion or effects controls panel up here. I'm just under motion, you have scale. I'm just going to click on this little drop down arrow. And we have uniform scale selected right now, but I want to deselect that because I just want to scale the width and not the height. So now what I want to do is create a new keyframe. So I'm going to click on this little toggle animation. It's going to create a keyframe at the beginning. And I want the scale to appear initially at 0 because I want it to be invisible. And now I'm going to move forward a few frames. So I'm just going to move forward to say, holding down Shift, hit my right arrow key, 1, 2, 3. And now I'm just going to hit another keyframe by clicking this keyframe button. And now I'm just going to make the scale width 100. So it's going to gradually go from 0 to 100. And when I play this through, you'll see that the line just appears because we're scaling the width from 0 to 100. Now what I want to do is create a bit of a smoother motion when I'm scaling the line. So what I can do is I can click on my clip and I can see my 2 keyframes, and I'll just zoom in a bit by dragging this across so I can see things a bit better. Now holding Shift, what I can do is I can lock to my keyframe, click on my keyframe and right click and go ease out. So now that I've done that, I'll just click this little drop down arrow and now I'll see my little bezels here that I can drag out by clicking and holding. And the more you drag it out, the smoother the motion is going to ease out. So I want it to ease out nice and smoothly. And you can also play with the velocity here as well if you like. You can make it like negative velocity to make it speed up a bit more dramatically. And I just want to play it back just to see how it looks. So you can see when I play it, it's gradually smoothing out at the end. So it's going quite fast at the beginning, and then at the end it's smooth, it's going slower. Now that we have our animated line appearing, we now need to make the text appear out of the line. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our effects. We're just going to click on effects here. If your effects is hidden, you can just use this little arrow to make it appear. We have all our effects here, and we're just going to click in the box and type in transform. Type it correctly. Now that we have our transform, we're going to drag that effect onto our intro. So we're dragging onto the text, not onto the line. And this part is very important because we need transform so that we can actually move the mask we're going to create and hide the text without the mask and the text moving together. So it's very important that you add transform, otherwise it's not going to work. If we were to just create the mask without transform, when we try to move the text under the mask is just going to move with the text because it's the same effect, it's not a separate effect. So we need transform so that we can create it as 2 separate effects. Okay, so now that we're under transform, what we need to do is we need to click on our opacity here and create our mask. So we're just going to click on opacity and we're going to click on this little square. That's going to create a square mask. Now we can click on the edges here by either dragging across and selecting these edges. And we want this to be fairly wide, so we're going to drag our mask out to almost the full width of the screen. We're going to do the same on this edge here. And if you hold down shift, it's going to keep everything nice and square, and that's what we want. We don't want our edges to be angled. I think I might have angled a bit there, so I'm just going to undo. So make sure you hold shift, because this box has to be square to create this animation. Now we want to do the same at the bottom. We're just going to drag over our points, and we're just going to hold shift and we're going to drag down. And we want to make this box fairly large. Now what we want to do is we're going to go to the beginning of our clip. We're going to lock to our playhead by holding shift. And we want to actually move forward one. So we're going to move forward one right on our keyboard. And we need to see the line so that we can position the mask just at the very edge of the line. So holding shift on our keyboard, we're going to click on our mask and we're going to drag it, hold shift and drag it down to just to the top of the line. Now you may need to zoom in to be able to see this more clearly. So you can go to here and you can go to zoom into about 150%. And we can see that we're not quite on the top of the line. So we're just going to move it to about there. Now at the moment we have feathering set to 10, but we just want to change the mask feather over here to 1 because we don't want to feather at 10 pixels. And you'll see that we're just on the edge of our line, like so. Now we can zoom back out by going to fit. Okay, so as you can see, our text has disappeared. What we need to do is click on our mask and we need to go to inverted. So inverted means that the text is going to show. When it's not inverted, the text is going to be invisible. So we want to hide our text under the mask. So firstly, we're going to go to the beginning of our clip. We're going to lock it with shift and lock our playhead to the clip. Now what we want to do is move the text. We don't want to move the mask because the mask is going to stay in that position. So we're going to go to our transform right here. And we're going to click on position. We're going to toggle the animation. And now it's going to create a keyframe. And now we're going to move our text down by moving the Y position. We don't want to move the X position. We're going to move this Y position. So we're going to drag this down like so. So dragging to the left will move it up. Dragging to the right will drag it down. And you'll see as we drag it down, it's going to hide it underneath the mask. So we just want to barely hide it, just so it's fully hidden. Now what we want to do is create another keyframe. So we're going to move forward by holding shift and right arrow, 1, 2, 3. And we're just going to toggle another keyframe by clicking on this keyframe. And next we want to make our text appear above the line where it was. So what we're going to do now is drag this up. Sorry, drag it down. And we're going to drag it to roughly where it was. So it was actually at 1080, and 1080 is the center. The next thing we need to do is we need to move this text along a bit so it comes out of the line a little bit later. We want it to emerge from the line when the line's almost at full width. So we're just going to go to this position here when the line's almost at full width, and we're going to drag this top intro text clip to that position. So now when we play it back, it's going to appear out of the line a little bit later, and that just looks a little bit better. The next thing we need to do is add some easing to this text coming out of the line. So we're going to click on our intro text clip, scroll down to our keyframes, zoom in a little bit, and we're going to hold shift and lock to this last keyframe. We're going to click on it and right click and go temporal interpolation, ease out. Next we're just going to drag up this little bezel and just put a little bit of easing at the end, like so. And we're also going to do the same with this bezel here, just to make it a bit smoother. Now we're going to play this back, and you'll see it kind of pops out of the line. It's a little bit too sudden, so I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. I'm going to move this down slightly, like so. Still a little bit sudden, so I'm just going to adjust it. It's just a matter of tweaking it until you get it looking right. And that's looking quite nice. It's nice and smooth. Okay, so now we're going to trim these clips. I'm just going to drag the end of the clip and trim them. And the next thing we need to do is duplicate this clip. So we're just going to hold Alt on a PC on both of these clips, and or Option on a Mac, and just click and drag and duplicate these clips. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag the clips to the end like so. And what we want to do is we want to get rid of the animation on these clips. So we're going to click on this first clip, and we're just going to remove this first keyframe. And now we're just going to remove this second keyframe as well. And that way our text isn't animated. And we're going to do the same thing with this. So I'm just going to click on this, remove this first keyframe, and now we're going to delete this keyframe as well. So now we have our text in our line and it's not animated. And what we need to do is we need to animate this line so it rotates. So we're going to hold down Shift and go to the beginning of our line clip. We're going to click on rotation, click on the little toggle animation, and that's going to create a keyframe. And now we're going to move forward by holding Shift on our right arrow. 1, 2, 3, we'll make it 4 this time. And now what we're going to do is click on this again, add another keyframe, and we're going to change the rotation to 180 degrees. So you'll see that it's rotated 180 degrees, but the problem is it's rotating off axis. So we can fix that by changing our anchor point. So we'll click on this frame. We'll actually go to the beginning because that'll be easier. We'll go to the very beginning. And now we'll go to our anchor point, and we'll just click on this anchor point, and you'll see that the anchor point comes up as a blue circle. Now we just need to zoom in, so we'll zoom into 150%, and we want to click and drag our anchor point to the center of the line. So it's going to rotate around that anchor point. That will ensure the line doesn't move. And we're just going to make sure that it's also centered, so it's at 1920, because it's off. If it's off center, it's not going to work right. And that's looking pretty good. Now we'll zoom back out, go back to our fit view. And now when we play this back, it's going to rotate on the correct axis. You'll see that it rotates properly now. So that's a very important step. All right, the next thing we need to do is put a bit of easing on this line, just to make it look a bit smoother. So we'll click on our line clip. We'll go to our keyframe. We'll hold Shift to lock to our last keyframe here. We'll click on it, and we'll right click and go ease out. Next, we just need to expand this little drop down arrow here. We'll see these little bezels. We're going to pull them out. We're just going to pull it out slightly at the end. Now we're just going to play it back, and you'll see it kind of slows down at the end, and that's just a nice little touch. All right, so now that we've done that, what we want to do is the part that's a little bit tricky and time consuming. So once you get the hang of it, it's not difficult, but this is a bit of manual adjustment. But what we need to do is click on this first clip, and that's the clip that has our mask on it, if you remember. Now, if we click on our mask here, we can see that our mask is currently below our line, or it's in line with the top of our line. What we want to do is rotate this mask to gradually wipe away the text, and we want to do it in time with the line. So there's really no way to do that automatically because there's no rotation feature on our mask. I don't really know of a way of doing this automatically. So we need to do it manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to lock our player to the beginning of our clip by holding Shift. Make sure that our text is selected. We're going to click on our little mask path toggle animation button right here. And now what we want to do is move forward one frame by using our right arrow key while selecting the mask. So we're going to click on our mask, move forward one arrow key. And now we're going to rotate our mask using the end point here. We're just going to hold it down, rotate it. And what we want to do is zoom in a little bit to make it a bit easier, but we want to actually line it up with our line. So the rotation should be roughly in line with our line. If it helps, you can zoom in, but it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate because again, it's going to happen quite quickly. And now we're just going to do the same. We're going to move forward one frame, making sure that we're clicked on our sequence right here, move forward one frame. And now we're just going to rotate it again. And you will have to reposition it a little bit. So you'll have to move it around. This can take a little bit of time. Just try and get it as best you can. Now we'll click back on our clip, move forward one frame. And this is just a process of going through each frame one by one and moving it and actually rotating the mask. Now I've jumped ahead to the point where I've done all my rotations of my mask and it's in line with the line that rotates. So when I play it through, it's gradually wiping away the text. And you'll see when I click on this top text clip, you'll see on my keyframes that it's created. Now what I want to do is trim this clip to the last keyframe. So I'm going to hold down Shift and lock my playhead to the last keyframe. And now I'm just going to drag and trim this clip. I'm going to trim the bottom clip as well. And now I need to duplicate both these clips again. So I'm going to drag over both the clips, hold down Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac and duplicate the clips. Now with the keyframes right here, one thing I need to mention is that it doesn't really matter where your mask ends up as long as the mask is covering the text. So all the way to the end when the line goes perfectly flat after the rotation, you want to make sure the mask is covering the text. That's very important. Now all we need to do to make this a continuous animation, to make the text wipe back on, is change this top clip right here with the mask to not being inverted. So when we uncheck inverted, when selecting this second clip that we just duplicated, it's going from wiping the text away to now wiping the text back on. And that's pretty cool because we don't have to redo this first animation. We can just reuse it and literally toggle that inverted button off. Now we're wiping the text back on. We're just going to extend this a little bit just to make it a little bit longer, and we're going to drag this bottom clip along as well to extend that too. Now when we play it through, we just want this text to show long enough so that it's readable. So we're just going to make it a bit longer again. And this is all a matter of preference. I think that's pretty good the way it is. Maybe a little bit shorter. Now all we need to do is double click on this top clip with our text and change the text because we don't want it to be saying the same thing over and over. So I'm just going to change this to Renclif Media. You can put your own business name or whatever name you like. I'm going to change this to buy. I'm going to delete the A. And the text might be a little bit bigger, but what we're going to do is just decrease the font size a little bit just to make it fit within that line. So we're just going to change from 135 to about 113. And I'm going to change the buy and make it a little bit smaller as well. Maybe make it 86. And I might just squash it a bit as well. So I'll make the tracking -2 maybe. And that's fitting pretty well. All right. So now we have our animation, a short film, wipes away, and then it wipes on by Renclif Media. What we need to do now is duplicate this clip again. So we're just going to hold down Alt, Option on a Mac, or Alt on a PC and duplicate that clip. And now we need to get rid of this animation. So we're just going to drag over all these keyframes and we're going to delete all the keyframes all the way to the beginning. All right, but we're going to keep this first keyframe because we don't want to get rid of our mask entirely. We still want to use it. And we keep the first one because that's where it's in that correct position that we want to use. Now we just need to do this inverted thing again where we click this inverted button and that's going to make the text reappear. So now we have the text wiping on and just staying in the same position. And we have our mask all ready for our text to go below the mask again and disappear. Just the same as we did in the beginning. So I'm just going to drag this further again just to make this line a little bit longer. And now what we need to do is make the line disappear again like it did in the beginning. So we're just going to contract the line by clicking on here. And we're going to go forward a little bit to about this position right here. And we're just going to create a new keyframe under scale and width. So we're just going to create a keyframe there. And now we're just going to move forward 1, 2, 3, 3 frames by using our arrow key and holding Shift. And we're just going to create a new keyframe like so. and we're going to make the scale width 0. So it's just doing the opposite of what we did in the beginning by making the line contract. So now when we play it through, the line contracts back to being nothing. Now what we can do is we can add some easing to this line, the same as what we did in the beginning with the first line animation. So we'll just go to our line clip, make sure it's selected. We'll go to our last keyframe and we'll click on this, right click and go ease out. And we'll drag this little bezel, just drag it up a little bit. So it's going to be a smooth speed up at the end. And now we're just going to play it back and see how that looks. And that's a little bit jumpy, so I'm just going to drag it down a little bit, make it a little bit smoother. And that's looking pretty cool. All right, so now I want to make the text disappear into the line below the mask like I did before in the beginning. So I'm going to click on my text clip at the top. I'm going to scroll down to where I have my position toggle animation. I'm going to create a new keyframe. Now I'm going to move forward, say 1, 2, 3 frames by holding shift and right on my keyboard, right arrow. I create a new keyframe. Now I'm going to move the position down, the Y position. So I'm going to click on this and drag it to the right, and that's going to move the text down below the mask. And now when we play it back, it actually disappears into the line, but it's not, the timing isn't quite right yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this clip a little bit. I'm just going to drag this down and trim it. I'm going to move this back a little bit because I want it to disappear into the line a bit sooner. So that's almost right. But it's not quite fast enough. You'll see it's just not quite right. So what we can do is we can click on our top clip with our text and we can make this happen a little bit quicker by dragging our keyframe to the left. We can also add a little bit of easing. So we're just going to right click on this keyframe and go temporal interpolation, ease out. Now we're just going to add a little bit of easing. We want it to kind of be a bit smoother, so we can kind of speed it up at the end, or we can slow it down at the end. Just going to give that a go. Yeah, I mean, that's looking pretty cool. And you can tweak it a bit if you like to get it perfect, or you know, you can change the easing to however you like. But I'm pretty happy with that. So it disappears into the line and then the line disappears. So that's pretty much it for our animation. And the final touches would be that we make this clip a bit longer so that the title stays over the clip the whole time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of speed ramping on this clip. I'm going to right click on this clip. I'm going to go show clip frame, time remapping, speed. Okay, that's going to enable us to see the keyframes for speed. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this point where the camera pans up and my text begins to appear, and I'm just going to create a new keyframe under speed by clicking this keyframe right here. Now you'll see I have these two little bezels, and I can drag these out like so, and that's going to create some easing between this transition from a fast motion to a slow motion. Now all I need to do is click on my line to the right of my keyframes and drag down, and you'll see this little percentage title below the clip, and that's going to change as you drag it down, and we want to drag it down to 50% speed. So it's going to go from 100% speed, and when we play it back, it's going to gradually go to 50% speed. Now I will just drag this a bit to the left because I don't want it to be easing out quite so slowly. And we can also drag this little, if we zoom in a bit, we can drag this little bezel here. And if you move it to the left or the right, it's going to create a smoother motion between the transition. So our clip's still not quite long enough, so what I can do is I can drag this a bit more to the left to make the 50% speed a bit longer, and I can just drag my clip to the right under this clip right here and just extend it a little bit. Now for the final touches on this animated intro, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in an audio track. So I've got my project panel over here, I've got my music already. I'm just going to drop that into my timeline. I'm going to trim my audio track to the end of these clips by hitting W to trim it. And now I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-D while selecting my audio track, and that's going to create a default transition, an exponential fade. And now I'm just going to select my clip and hit Control-D, and that's going to add a default fade in transition as well on my video clip. The next thing I can do is I can do a quick color grade on this clip. Now for the sake of this tutorial, it's not really a color grading tutorial. So I'm just going to jump ahead to the point where I've done my color grade. So there's my color grade. It's all done. My transition, my titles is all completed. When I play it back, it looks pretty cool. And that's it for that tutorial, guys. I hope you really enjoyed watching this. I hope you learned something in the process. And I look forward to the next tutorial. Stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and drop me a comment below as well if you have any questions about this tutorial or anything to do with filmmaking or editing. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thanks very much and have an awesome day. See you guys next time. Bye.